Good morning. Blessings. I have an interesting article today, and in connection with these vlog segments, one of the things I want to do is to remind you of the current state of the battle or the debate in science between what's called the intelligent design movement and the Darwinian movement. Now, I am not referencing Bible passages here, and it's important for you to know that this is a scientific debate that I am discussing today, and not necessarily the scripture passages. That's not to suggest that there isn't plenty of evidence supporting scriptures, but that if you're going to be debating with a Darwinist, you need to reference the science because they just offhand dismiss the Bible. So you need to know something about the science. Today I saw a news article that is in Newsweek online, and it's the title, Man Finds Sea Fossil 8,300 feet up a mountain, and people think it's proof of a great flood. Now, what's interesting about that is that this is designed, you can tell by the title of the article, it's designed to counter that perception that there was a great flood. So obviously this is going to be coming from this, we are in the scientific community and there was no great flood and we have an alternative explanation for finding sea fossils up 8,000 plus feet on mountains. And what they found were crinoids, which are sea creatures that grow about 100 feet down depth, and they're in the same family as starfish and sea urchins. They found beautifully preserved fossils of these things up, yes, over 8,000 feet on a mountain. And in fact, this is not unusual. All of the high mountains of the world do display sea fossils, and that is a very, very strong evidence of a global flood. The attempt here is to try to dismiss it as though these things were formed underwater, these fossils were formed underwater, and then later through upthrust, the mountains were formed. This is pretty lame. It's pretty weak. One of the big arguments against that is that fossils do not typically form through slow processes. They try to suggest that this slow, continuous evolution and that creatures die and get buried, and then slowly over time the rock is formed. That's nonsense. Fossils are not formed, and we know the science behind this. You don't form fossils through slow processes. You form fossils quickly. They have to be buried quickly in very catastrophic conditions. It is very, very unlikely that these things were fossilized underwater. That's ridiculous. So most likely what happened was that during the flood stages, these were carried up because of the violence of the tectonic plate movement and the fracturing of it, the falling in of the seafloor, causing tidal wave activity. This would have caused a reorientation of the tectonic plates. Now, before I forget, I want to show you this very scholarly work, this scientific work called Carved in Stone by Timothy Clary. Timothy Clary was in the oil industry as a geologist, so he relies on the oil company's data from the wells that they drilled, and this is a very serious scholarly work replete with data of the strata, the rock strata. And Timothy Clary has made a very comprehensive theory of the flood and then the aftermath and finally the ice age. It's a beautifully done book. And the bottom line is that these fossils, these crinoids that end up on the mountain, are not to be written off because of tectonic activity. The fact of the matter is, one, the fossils, sea fossils' appearance as fossilized creatures supports the flood. And two, the upthrust of the mountains also supports the flood. So, contrary to the Darwinian theory, both of these support the Great Flood. What would have happened was, because of the tectonic activity, tidal waves would have come carrying in these sea creatures and mixing them with land creatures, burying them so that they would be fossilized. And then the upthrust activity would have moved these layers of animals that were getting fossilized up as the large peaks occurred. A lot of Christians don't realize that this holistic theory of the flood in this book, this is the new science about the flood. And the belief now in the scientific community and Christianity is that there were not great high mountains originally, but that the earth was more uniform in terms of its topology, but that the great mountains were formed when the catastrophic plate tectonics took place. And that's where you can see out west, where a lot of these very, very huge jagged peaks, you can actually see the layers of the crust as it buckled and was upthrust. Truly phenomenal. So the Darwinists are going to continue to try to dismiss what is phenomenal evidence of the flood. They're going to try to suggest that these crinoid creatures lived in much more shallow seas originally, and now they live deeper. There's no real big reason for that. They just have to come up with these things in order to try to dismiss the really hard evidence, pardon the pun, the fossil evidence that is right before us. So both the fossils from the seafloor and the upthrust mountains are both evidence of the Great Flood. And now you know it. So I hope that you will educate yourself, that you will get this book carved in stone. We have it sitting on the table in the entrance of the church. If you don't want to put out the money, 30, 40 bucks or whatever it costs, can't remember offhand, we have a copy of it sitting on the tables. Help yourself sit and page through it to see how robust the evidence is, and that there was, in fact, a great flood just as the Bible describes. Blessings.